Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to the patient pavilion, this is probably and certainly one of the highlights of this year's conference with our special guest, Rolf Benirschke. Rolf is many things. He's mostly known as a celebrity. He's a famous football player, the place kicker for the San Diego Chargers from 1978 until 1986, with several records left behind.
Still a few left, yep.
Okay, there's still a few left. He's a TV show master, which a lot of people do not know. When you met Merv Griffin, he kind of wanted you right away, right?
Yes, I got a chance to do the Wheel of Fortune for a year with Vanna White. It was quite an experience.
I bet it was. I wish I was eligible to participate.
A lot of my teammates wanted to come up for tapings of the show. I couldn't understand why. I'm sure it's to see me in my new role, but
yeah,
that was probably a lie.
And then you're a book author as well.
Yeah, I've written 3 books. I wrote my autobiography, Alive and Kicking, which chronicled my battle with inflammatory bowel disease and ostomy surgery. And then I wrote 2 subsequent books, which were compilation books, stories of patients who had not just overcome ostomy surgery, but returned to what they loved to do. And the stories absolutely blew up this restrictive lifestyle that we think we have to live in once we have ostomy surgery.
And out of that book, one of your famous quotes is, "It's not what you become, it's what you overcome." And we'll get back to that later. I don't want you to get into that right now.
Okay.
In the meantime, after showmaster, after football player, after author, you've been a very successful entrepreneur as well, and I don't want to indulge in that. But you've become most famous in your second job, which you're famous for right now, is a patient advocate. And that's because something happened to you early on in your football career. And that's the story that we really want to hear today.
Well, I appreciate that, Carol. So I'll start with that. So I'm not here by accident. I feel like I was sort of drawn to this by personal experience. So first of all, let me go back. I was born here in Boston. My dad went to medical school here at Harvard, taught at Harvard, ended up moving us when I was 5 to Dartmouth. So I was raised in sort of an academic medical world. My dad taught at Dartmouth until I was 15, then was recruited to UC San Diego, to a brand new medical school there, which was really disappointing for me because I was a hockey player by the time I left. We just won the States, and my brother was a really good skier, and we moved to San Diego. There was no hockey, there was no skiing. But it turned out to be this incredible blessing because Dad joined this research department at the new UCSD Medical School that just invigorated him unbelievably. So my whole life was academic medicine. My older brother, became a physician. And then, much to the chagrin of my father, I was drafted into the National Football League. I became the kicker for the San Diego Chargers, ultimately for 10 years. My father, shaking his head, where did I go wrong that my son would end up kicking it? They're going to pay you to kick a football? He was an immigrant. We didn't grow up with a television. He's from Germany, in fact, as you might imagine. But all of that changed in my second season when I came down with Crohn's disease. So you said I was a football player. The truth is I was a kicker. There's a differentiator between a kicker and a football player.
That's my German heritage.
That's your German heritage. And the reason I laugh at myself is you're either the starting kicker or you're unemployed. And I loved what I was doing. Our team was getting good. There was a love affair with our community and the team. Our coach had coached at San Diego State, and I was having some success. So I got, in all essence, a stomach ache with bad diarrhea. And imagine the guys you're playing with, right? They're getting concussed, tearing their knees. And so I kept my head down and tried to continue. And by the last month of the season, it was literally playing the game on Sunday. Sunday night, they'd take me to the hospital, put an IV in my neck. I'd be there all week, unable to eat, just fed intravenously. They would take it out Saturday night, spend the night with the team, play the game on Sunday, and repeat that for the last month. So I didn't eat, survived, got to the end of the season. If you look 10 years statistically, it was one of the best years of my career. But I was dying. Tried to come back and play the third year, and 4 games into the season, collapsed on the team plane. They landed it. I had surgeries, complications of the surgeries, and I wake up from my second surgery 6 days after the first in the same hospital where my dad is practicing, 65 pounds below my playing weight, with 2 ostomy bags on my side, and my dad's colleagues telling him, "We're not sure Rolf's going to survive the night." And I survived, spent 2 months in the hospital, and then asked, why did I survive? From my perspective, there was nothing worth living for. I love sports. I had bags on my side. I think I'll never do that. I'm making my living as a professional. I'll never do that again, I was convinced. And I was single, and I liked girls, and I was pretty sure that was over too. And then I didn't die. And then I had to learn to live with an ostomy bag. And I learned in the process of recovering that this restrictive lifestyle box that we think we're going to have to live in when we wear an appliance just wasn't real. I started to hear the stories of people that became police officers again, firefighters, people that became triathletes again. And as I recovered, I was given the chance to play and played 7 more years with the Chargers. And that's where my life really changed. Because of the media attention focused on a player, I got to tell my story, and it would prompt hundreds of letters into it was actually funny, Carol. It was, Rolf Benirschke misspelled San Diego Chargers, San Diego, California. And I'd come back, and there'd be, after an interview, there'd be 50 letters. And the letters were all the same. How can you survive and play with an ostomy? And that's where my passion to speak out on behalf of patients and what we go through started.
That's where it kicked in. It's not what you become. It's not what you become. It's what you overcome.
It's what you overcome.
That's what you meant with that.
We all have challenges in life, and I think in health that's a big one. And when you overcome that, you live life differently. And all of a sudden, I recognized I should have died at 24. I was given a second chance, and the question became a very real one. Then how are you going to spend your life? What's it going to count for? What's it going to mean? And for me, there was this drawing to patients and what they're going through. What we're in right now, Carol, is a patient revolution. It's a revolution. Now, some of the companies here at MedTech understand it, and some are totally missing it. There is a revolution. Patients are changed. We're different. We have access to information now via the internet. Sometimes it's wrong, but we're informed. We might be, but we're informed. We have the ability to connect socially with other patients who tell us about their experiences, the good or bad companies, the good or bad hospitals, the good or bad doctors. And all of a sudden, the power of the patient has become real. We want to support this industry. We want to support the companies that took care of us. We want to advocate on your behalf, but we want to be included. We think it ought to be imperative that big companies have KOLs, key opinion leaders, that are patients, not just physicians. It's important to have physicians, absolutely. But when you can include patients, you get the whole view of the experience that a patient goes through.
Well, you're kind of really just dropped on my questions because you've answered them to a certain degree. What has changed for patients? What are patients different except for that digital part and that informed part from 20 years ago? What is the evolution for you
So that's
personally?
a great question. How are patients different? So I'll give you an example on the patient advocacy side. So when I bring up HIV, we think of the activists that had to poke companies in the eye or the legislators in the eye to deal with HIV. They were activists in the truest sense of the word. We judged them and their lifestyles. And what came out of that was this activist group that enabled all of this funding to go to their disease. We have made HIV a chronic condition that people can live a normal life and die a normal. It was because of these activists, but they had to poke people in the eye. What's different today is that patients are grateful. Not that they weren't, but we are grateful to the point where we're asking, include us. Allow us to be part of everything from the way you design clinical trials, so you know what's important to us as an outcome. When you go to create materials, when you brand your product, when you bring them to market, when you want somebody to advocate on your behalf, allow the patient to do that. We don't want to poke you in the eye. We want to partner with you. And that's the biggest change. Now, on top of that is all the information we have access to, the ability to connect with others. But driving that is this desire to help, because there are millions of us who are grateful. There's a big healthcare debate raging right now, right? Cost of healthcare, outcome-based, patient centricity, patient-driven, all of those shared decision-making. Those are real to a patient. We want to be part of the decision. Let's use an example, heart. So if I'm 85 years old and I'm being told I need a heart valve replacement, and the option is to crack my chest or to have a new elegant procedure TAVR, I'm likely not going to crack my chest. Even when this was first experimental, the TAVR through your groin and up your heart, I would much rather do that because my quality of life is more important. So that shared decision-making aspect is real, and you see it here. You guys have a patient pavilion. How special to listen to the patients and their passion and desire to be involved.
So you've complimented several of our companies, but you've also criticized several of the companies not doing it the correct way. What do companies have to do to move to a patient-centric model? What would your suggestions be?
So great question. So how do you move to this sort of patient-centric model? I think people are drawn to the industry because they want to help. And so one of the things patients can do is reactivate the why they got involved with their company. And as we talked prior to, the legislation, the bureaucracy, the difficult part of doing business has sucked the life out of many of the people in this room because of that. The slowness, the frustration about dealing with regulation, over-regulation. You talked earlier, I watched you in a session, you were brilliant about there's some bad apples that have made some bad decisions that have painted your whole industry as bad, and so this pendulum has swung all over to this point where you're over-regulated. It's frustrating for you because you can't do the things that you are driven to do, which is create these elegant solutions and bring them to patients. Patients want to help you swing that pendulum back, be involved in the process. And if for example, I'll give you a couple, if every CEO here, every month or every 2 months said to their secretary or their assistant, I want to have lunch with 3 patients in the disease state that I work on, that would be a huge step. If you could create KOLs, along with your KOLs of physicians with patients, if you could actually train what patient engagement really means to these people who got into the business because they loved it, but are removed from it because they don't have any patient direct interaction, would do a ton.
Well, those are excellent suggestions, and actually I might even pick up on that. I don't think I do enough patient interaction like that, at least the way you do. I go into hospitals, I talk to patients, but really sitting down with them and discussing. Now, we need patients who are willing to do that, and they have to have a certain knowledge also of what's going on. Where do I find these patients?
That is a great question. It can't be anybody. I think you have to find the right patient, the one who isn't going to stick you in the eye, but who can also point out, here's some things we think you should do differently. And if you do those differently, what you get is not just a company that gets infused with the power of the patient's understanding and willingness, but you also give them the opportunity to speak on your behalf, both as individual CEOs, as your company, and as your industry that is moving towards embracing patients, which is ironic to me because your whole industry is built on working for patients. But if you changed it to working with patients and included that as part of the way you think, it infuses everything and changes everything. And they then get to tell in their social networks what is actually happening. And that, to me, is powerful.
Well, Rolf, when I met you for the first time, I was really intrigued right from the beginning. And you've taught me a lot about patient advocacy, what we have to do and what we can do. And I think it helped our organization understand going more towards a patient-centric model, certainly than we had before, and we'll continue to go down that path. We're over with our time right now, but I think we have a couple of more minutes. What would you like to let our audience know that I haven't asked?
Well, first of all, thank you. And I think one of the blessings for me is having met you and then your team. They are committed to it, and you're willing to change. So the whole story, if you can't teach an old dog, is a lie. You are willing to change, as is your group, which is awesome. I think
with the old dog, he didn't mean me. He meant B. Braun, which is 180 years
180
old.
years
right?
old.
There you go.
Incredible company. I think that the message I would leave is the work you do is not lost on us. We are grateful. There are millions of us who don't get a chance to thank you. Everyone in this room who is working hard to bring new solutions. I wish we could. I wish we could, each one of us, stand in front of you and say, you saved my child's life. I have a premature daughter that was kept alive. She's 26 now, wouldn't be here. I mean, I can name you 100 different patients whose life would be different. I ended up getting hepatitis C. The pharma industry changed my life, saved my life. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those stories, but we're not actually allowed to be involved in this healthcare debate. So it's gratefulness, but include us. We want to be part of repealing the med device tax. It's ridiculous that there should be a med device tax that keeps you from innovating, hiring people. It's ludicrous. The people that have credence are the patients who are alive because of your innovation, your willingness to fight. And when you can activate us to do those kinds of things, I think we'd be grateful even more.
Well, thanks. Lessons learned. Rolf, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your very personal experience with us, your story, but even more so, thank you for your patient advocacy. It's impressive and it's working. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rolf Benirschke.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.